This is the Photography is My Passion podcast, episode 7. In this episode, how much is too much?
Usually I film these episodes from beginning to end and I don't edit them at all. But in this one here, I started this podcast already and I actually deleted it and started over because I was coming across as a pretentious jerk. So I apologize in advance if I come across as a pretentious jerk as I talk about pretentious jerks. The reason being is I think this needs to be said. Over the last maybe 2.5 years that I've been teaching photography online, every now and then, not often, but every now and then I'll get an email or a message from someone telling me I should be ashamed of myself for teaching people to process the images like I do, that they should only accept the reality of the camera. Let the camera do the processing, and all this other stuff is horrible and I should be ashamed of myself. Well, I dismiss it. It doesn't hurt my feelings or anything. I usually dismiss it because usually this comes from people that really don't understand photography. They don't know the history of photography and really what a photographer used to do in the darkroom. To give a little history for those of you that may not know it and maybe didn't shoot film at a professional level. Back in the day, you would shoot and you'd expose a piece of film and you would process the film into a negative. Then you would take that negative and you would print it. This is where the personality of the photographer gets imprinted on their work. How I might have print that negative, how I might print that negative would be totally different than how someone else might print that negative. And we'd get the same scene, but it would look very different. And the reason is that you could do a lot in the darkroom that influences how that print gets done. Ansel Adams is a great example. There have been photographers that have stood shoulder to shoulder to him with their cameras right next to his, taking the same exact scene, but Ansel Adams' print is head and shoulders above everyone else's. Ansel Adams was a master printer. He knew what chemicals to use, what paper to use. He knew when to dodge and burn, how to dodge and burn his images so that it just was spectacular, and that's what made him famous. Clicking the shutter didn't make Ansel Adams famous. His darkroom work is what made him famous. And it was like that for all the famous photographers in the past that shot film. It's what they did in the darkroom really is what counted. And it's really no different today. Today you're taking a digital image, so you have a digital file, and you're taking that digital file and you're processing it in the digital darkroom. So you're really just imprinting your feelings, your emotions, your biases onto your image, and that's the way it should be. Somebody could literally take a digital shot, a raw image of a scene, and give it to 100 different photographers and have them process it. And very few would look identical. And again, that's the way it should be. I should process my images my way, and you should process your images your way. Now, me as a mentor and a teacher, I have to teach people how to use all the different controls and sliders, all these mechanical things. So I'm going to show them how to do this, but my hope is they end up developing their own style and start imprinting their emotion on their image. And that really is the gist of it. You really can't sit back and look at somebody's image and say, nice fake image, which is actually a comment that I saw once on a photography group on Facebook. Person, I don't remember if it was a man or a woman, they had this beautiful image. It was a river and like a bridge that went over the river, and the city was in the background, and it was this HDR shot, and it was really a spectacular image. And somebody wrote nice fake image, like there's some type of elitist and they just know photography better than anyone else. And they really don't understand. It isn't, the reality isn't what the camera captured. There really isn't a reality. You're recording a sliver of time and then you're interpreting it for your audience. And that's what post-processing is. You're interpreting your image for the audience, and then they run with it. They interpret it for themselves using your visual clues of what you did when you processed the image. So really, give it a rest. If you're really so critical of somebody else's photography, that just means it's a subjective medium. You like it your way, they like it their way. It doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong, or vice versa. It's just taste. It's just the way it is. Now, there is something happening to photography at the other end of the spectrum. For an example, let's talk about the art world. In certain type of modern art called conceptual art, there's a lot of junk. And right here in Buffalo, New York, there's the Albright Knox Art Gallery, which I go to quite often, and they have a lot of conceptual art, modern art. And some of it is very good. I'm not saying all of it is crap, but there is a lot of conceptual art that is just horrible. And let me explain first. For instance, I seem to recall now, I think I saw this at the Albright Knox Art Gallery. There's just a sink, and it had like a tube of toothpaste and a toothbrush on one side and the other, and that was it. And there's some deeper meaning here, I guess, right? There is a painting that is just painted white, total white. That's it, all right? So, okay, there's some deeper meaning, right, I guess? I don't know. So you walk around, they had a touring thing come in once, I remember, and there was like a unmade bed. It was just a slab bed. They had a Matisse, some workings from Matisse there recently. They were just, you know, look at Matisse. It's just like blotches and paints and lines and squares. And is that supposed to mean something? Well, what happens is there becomes a group of people that become these elitists, and they have to prove that they're just so much more into it and know so much more than anyone else, that they kind of ascribe this significance to the insignificant. They ascribe meaning to something that is meaningless. And for you to be in their little clique, you have to like see this meaning that isn't there, and revel in it. And it really is just a joke. And a lot of artists and art critics really take exception to that. And what you'll see is, you know, that it's just kind of run rampant and in the art world. And it's starting to creep into the world of photography as well. Recently, a photographer sold a picture of a potato, for over $1 million. Now, kudos for him, first of all, for selling a picture of a potato for over $1 million. I wish it was me. But quite frankly, why would someone buy a picture of a potato and pay over $1 million for it? Well, the only thing I could think of is they're ascribing meaning to the meaningless, and they're just want to like kind of show it off and make it, people think they just know so much more about art and photography than anyone else. And I could just imagine they have a dinner party, and this millionaire, billionaire that paid all this money for this thing has all his millionaire, billionaire friends over, and he or she says, you know, look at my potato. It cost me $1.2 million, let's say. And other people are saying, wow, you know, so-and-so really knows photography, paid $1.2 million for a potato. A few days later, one of those persons will go out and buy a picture of a toe with toe fungus on it and pay $1.3 million for it. So again, it's like ascribing meaning to the meaningless. It's really bad for photography. It's bad for art. But it's going to happen, and there's nothing I could say in this podcast that's going to stop it from happening. But if you feel compelled, the reason why I bring this up, if you feel compelled to be critical of someone's photographic art, don't pick on the person that is just learning photography and learning how to process their image and say it's junk, you should let the camera do the work. go after the elitists that are paying 1 point something million for a picture of a potato, because that is where the issue is, really, in my mind. And again, I know I'm coming across as quite pretentious, and deservedly so, I'm sure. But these are my opinions. Again, how much processing is too much processing? That is up to you. Really up to you. You might do very little. You might want to do a lot. It doesn't matter. It's really, photography is the bottom line. If you're an artist and you're painting or you're sculpting, you're really doing it for your own enjoyment first. If you're not, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. Same thing, if you're a photographer, you're really doing it for your own enjoyment first. Then beyond that, hopefully you can get some accolades from it if you want some accolades, and go from there. So that's it, just some of my scattered thoughts about the situation in photography nowadays, this digital realm we live in, where hopefully you're shooting raw when you're not creating an image, you're creating a data file. And the data file contains all the data from the scene. All the pixels are recorded as a number, and you will take that data file and you're using it in the digital darkroom to create an image. And that's where you as a photographer actually come out. And that's my feelings on the subject. So, interested to hear yours, just leave them in the comments below. Feel free to email me if you'd like to discuss it further, and if you think I'm wrong, I'm interested to hear that too. Now, next podcast, I think we'll be talking about back button focusing, mainly because I mentioned it a few times in a few different videos here and there, and I've been getting tons of people asking me about it and what's the advantages and disadvantages, and usually I just point them back to an article I wrote about it. But let's talk about it a little more in depth, and I'll explain why you should be back button focusing. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.